Thank you for joining us today, everybody. My name's Adam Wormsley. I'm here from Autodesk, and this is our first installment of the Civil Community Meetup for 2021. For those of you who have attended these in the past, I try to do these quarterly, and this is the first one that I've been able to schedule for this year. So today, I'm being joined by Andrew Wilson. So he's a digital engineering lead at Abley over in New Zealand. And he's going to get started pretty soon, and he's going to dig right into InfraWorks. So if we look at a quick agenda for today, Andrew's going to talk for the most part. He's going to do a deep dive into InfraWorks and how he's been able to use it to help him and his organization win more work. It's a pretty impressive presentation. I've seen it already, and I'm excited to share it with you guys. I'll then do a bit of a community update and talk a little bit about some of the conversations I've had in relation to Autodesk software over the last 6 months. And then please, I encourage Q&A at any time. If you want to use the Q&A box in the chat window here, please do that. And we can address the questions in the last 5 to 10 minutes or something like that. I mean, everybody loves free stuff. So you would have seen when you registered, you had to put in your address. One of these three things is coming your way for attending today. So we've got a stylus, we've got an Autodesk branded shopping bag, which is really awesome. If you're like me, I spend 15 cents on bags every time I go to Woolies. My wife hates it. Or if you're the most luckiest, you'll score a pair of Autodesk socks. I have them and they're super comfy. So with that, I will hand over to Andrew, give him the reins for the next 45 minutes. And then I'll take back over after that. Andrew, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
How's your day been, mate?
Bit of a mixed bag, but now's a good time for it to peak.
Nice. I've just given you control. You should be able to drive and share your screen. There you
All right. How does that look?
I can see you. Over to you, mate.
Wonderful. All right. I see we've got 70 in here. That's pretty good. Hello, everyone. Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, and to my friends across the ditch, g'day, mates. As advertised, I'm Andrew Wilson of Abley Limited, New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to be here at Adam's invitation to share my expertise and experience working with Autodesk products. So a little bit about me just before this presentation prepares for takeoff. Some of you who are regulars on Autodesk's forums may have come across my handiwork before. I solve a few problems here and there, ask some stupid questions from time to time, and discuss InfraWorks in Civil 3D. I serve as Abley's digital engineering lead, which, depending on what your definition of digital engineering is, could mean a lot of different things. Due to my blended background in engineering and IT, I serve as a sort of technical catch-all for a whole bunch of different areas of Abley's business. On any given day, I might function as a transport engineering designer, a CAD manager, technical solution architect, maybe an ETL automation specialist, and if the project calls for a one-man visualization studio. And I work along a team of data gurus and geospatial professionals who are all specialist problem solvers in their respective domains. Now, this presentation is centered around getting the most out of Autodesk's AEC suite offering and embracing Autodesk's tagline of make anything. However, as some of you work week in, week out on projects, I'm going to frame up this content within a true story of a few projects that I've been involved in over the last 18 months. I hope the following content will inspire you to think more about using Autodesk products in a slightly more creative manner. And yes, as Adam mentioned, you'll see how I've leveraged Autodesk products to win more work here at Abley. Let's begin our story in the tourist capital of New Zealand, Queenstown. Aussies, I understand there's a travel bubble, and if you haven't been here, you owe it to yourself to come to Queenstown, check it out for yourself, pay a visit. And just so we're clear, New Zealand Tourism Board did not pay me to say that. Now, those of you who have visited Queenstown will know it's famous for a few big things. Big mountains, big lakes, big thrills, And sadly, over the last 5 years, 2020 notwithstanding, big traffic. And so straining under the weight of an incredible number of tourists, peak traffic times into and out of Queenstown have ballooned into a complete nuisance. And you can see here that the projected growth for traffic in this town of about 20,000 people far outstrips the growth of traffic in a city of 2 million like Auckland. And it's clear that something must be done about the traffic. And so it was that local, regional and central government formed an alliance together to collectively address the growing transport issues. Public transport was identified as a key component of the overall solution, and to facilitate this, some changes really did need to be made. And as many of you are aware, then come in the consultants. We had Stantec, WSP, Jasmax, and of course, Abley. Now, collaboratively, we worked together to analyse, model and workshop solutions to repurpose and imagine the main corridor in and out of Queenstown, which is State Highway 6A. Now, in every workshop, there's always a few participants and a few stakeholders that are really intensely visual people. You know, the ones, they like to stand up and point at a picture or a whiteboard and take control of the session in a visual way. And clearly, at the concept workshopping level, there was a really strong case for a 3D model. Now, what there wasn't, however, was any budget allocated for this. So if we were going to build a 3D model, it needed to be fast, it needed to be accurate, you know, and it had to have demonstrable utility. Now, I can hear a few of you saying from across the Tasman here, shouting at your screens, well, that's not a problem, Andrew. Just fire up InfraWorks, open up the model builder feature, and it's all there for you. And well, that's true. I could have gone ahead and done that, but why don't I try and go one better? So let's talk about Land Information New Zealand's data, which has got a real wealth of publicly available spatial data, all of which is really easy to access, and it just runs off a web service you can pull it down from. I'm talking about road center lines, property parcels, building footprints, aerial photography, digital elevation models, all of the standard stuff that would normally go coming through various feeds in your model builder, but this is New Zealand specific high-res data. And of course, there's aerial LiDAR available from relatively recent overflights. And you can see here that you know, some of this data comes through as nothing really special. The LiDAR was just black and white data. So I did some filtering by classification, did a little bit of clipping around the road corridor, added some false color from some similar dated high-res aerials. And then, you know, that really helped fill out the scene, as you can see, for the really visual types out there. And I might talk a little bit more about how this was relatively painlessly achieved later on. So, armed with some very basic renders from my rough and ready pre-viz quality model, our transport planner, who may or may not be on this call, gave the workshopping team some compelling components to sort of talk to. And as the project progressed, more and more data was just quietly added in the background of the model, just a few tweaks around the edges to help facilitate the exchange of ideas. And by the time this had gone on for a few months, it was pretty obvious that there was going to be a decent sized corridor upgrade for this State Highway 6A corridor. And before long came time to investigate the preferred option. No problem, we said. We'll just export the proposed alignment and component roads with the normal standard Autodesk workflow out to IMX, and that can serve as a base for the detailed geometric design in Civil 3D. And at this point, I'd like to have a shout out to anyone from the engineering team at WSP who prepared the detailed design for this. They did a really good job, and their quality work made it easy for us to import the finished design back in through InfraWorks and do some downstream analysis on it. Now, you've no doubt noticed that Queenstown's a really nice looking place, and the lakefront property values seem to reflect that. Now, combined with a bit of a geotech site walkover that was done by the project team, we were able to take all this data and do some estimates around property purchase, earthworks, demolition, and break it down on a nice chainage by chainage by chainage basis. And we chose to collaborate in the Esri AGOL environment, and we got all the project team in on it so they could see what was going on for each of the for the detailed design proposal for the corridor, and they could see what the impact was on all of the different corridors and areas with respect to change by change breakdown. And that was really easy to pull this data in later on downstream back into InfraWorks, because InfraWorks now elegantly connects to AGOL, and you can pull that data straight into your model. So here's a brief flyover of our model that we built for visualization. I'll just start that. And you'll notice a few interesting things in this video. Some wavy pink lines that were added by request of client. These are the indicative boundary positions of the road parcels, the corridor. You can see I've added a few little nice touches like the traffic in from 3D Studio using the standard workflow. This corridor focuses on having a bus priority lane in each direction, a cycle lane on one side, and a mixed use sort of active mode in blue on the left there. You can see how using the clipped LiDAR and using the false color on it really brings out a bit more in the model, gives it a bit more pop for the visual types. And thanks to the nice reflection shaders and a bit of extra geometry added for the surrounding mountain landscapes, reflections look really, really good. And it's, you know, it's a lot easier to recognize it as Queenstown's 6A corridor. I'll let that finish. As you can see, it's a very windy corridor, and there's a lot of twists and turns and tight accesses that come onto and off it. And doing some modeling on that further on down in the project was certainly a challenge. Right, so at this stage, the benefits and value of the InfraWorks model were more or less readily espoused by the project team. And that meant, thankfully, we got some budget carved out for us to keep developing this model, keep adding things into it. And this was really good for providing visual areas for consultation and giving some optioneering of the town centre area as well. Well, so far, so good. And we're a few minutes in, and the InfraWorks people out there that use it a bit will notice this is all pretty much standard fare InfraWorks content. And here's a brief recap of what you've seen. You know, we've done the integration of detailed geometric design. We've done assessment of earthworks, break change by change, rapid visualization, high quality data in there. And we've got really good results from the project team and the stakeholders that they talk to. And of course, on the technical side, we've done some extraction of the earthworks extents from the Civil 3D detailed model. We did the LiDAR clipping and coloration. We've done the standard IMX workflow. I put in a nice custom median texture to show that flush median down the center of the road, and of course the animated traffic from 3D Studio. So things are going pretty well with the project. And in the industry, we all know what that really means. It means that it's probably time for something to go wrong. So why not a project plot twist? Now, all of the analysis that we've done to date show that it was going to be an incredibly expensive highway, change by change, to construct for a number of different reasons. And that meant that along with doing this upgrade, it might be time to consider some, additional options. And in the background, the planners have been quietly scheming away, thinking about maybe there's some other public transport routes that could complement this design. And it's about here where this presentation takes the first available off-ramp and we start tearing off towards making anything. So, enter Doppelmayr. Part of the Garaventa group, Doppelmayr are the world's leading manufacturers of ropeways, cable cars, and ski lifts. The project lead approached me and said, Andrew, we want you to put a gondola in the model. We want to workshop alignments, have a look at property purchase. We want to check out what the visual impact's going to be of this gondola, have a look at some view sheds. We want to have a think about how we're going to integrate the terminals into the public transport network around the outside. Your software can do that, right? Well, the gauntlet had been thrown down. How much value could we squeeze? How much can we leverage this model that we originally built for free? So it was time to go over the top. So working together with Doppelmayr, we were able to set up a ArcGIS feature layer where the project team could just cruise in there and draw the proposed alignments, and they would have returned back to them some vertical profiles of those alignments for their proposal. And in this slide, you can see that there's a few different types of alignment proposed, each with their own merits. And we did quite a bit of workshopping and having a look at this in 3D in the InfraWorks model to get a feel for what they really looked like. Now, I received a crash course from Doppelmayr in gondola design and finished up with an incredibly rudimentary idea of how Doppelmayr puts things together. They were even kind enough to give me some 3D models to insert. One with a preferred alignment that had been selected, and the preferred alignment here is the red line on this. There's a couple of others here in these images from earlier project shots, but you can see it starts at Frankton here, goes up out over the hill, down and behind all of the residential houses and holiday homes along the 6A corridor, up to the peak of the hill behind Queenstown, and then plunges right down into the heart of Queenstown where all the tourist activity is taking place. And here you can see a nice profile of that red alignment that Doppelmayr gave to me. So with a bit of careful positioning of the 3D models and the drawing files that they provided, I pieced together the agreed alignment, did some work automatically deriving clearance zones for the poles and vegetation management. And there were a few different pole types and positions, and then I put in the terminal infrastructure at either end at the end of it. And then I invited Doppelmayr's local rep to come into our office and discuss the finer details at the project level. And he said, hey, looks great. You know, you really get a great sense of perspective, especially from up the top of the hill at the turn station there at the Queenstown Hill, of just how much of an awesome view you're getting looking out over the lake and out to the mountains. Now, the project team were pretty happy with what they saw. There's always one person that's a little more difficult, and the project group manager wanted to see some animated gondolas on it, just to really round out the picture. So I tried my best to fulfill this request, and here's a video from one of the conceptual planning models showing my first attempt at animated gondolas using 3D Studio. This is a nice pan to the left out over the Queenstown town centre, showing some of the bits and pieces that we'd put into the InfraWorks model. And as we head round to the left, you can see my attempt at 3D animated gondolas, and I used 3D Studio Max for that. So, not great, not terrible, depending on what your expectations are. But at the conclusion of this, Doppelmayr agreed with us that, you know, workshopping this stuff with InfraWorks had been really fun, and maybe we should do it again sometime. And so if a project showed up that Doppelmayr would have used for rapid visualization or flexible concept design for engagement or tendering purposes, they'd look up Abley and then give me a call. And then a few months later, my phone rang. And the man on the other end said, are you interested in some gondola work? So, looks like our work with InfraWorks had won us more work. At Doppelmayr, we're looking for some design visualizations, some visual impact study work, some little bit of feasibility analysis for what could be termed an ambitious client in the Queenstown area. And one might say this was offering us a remarkable opportunity. And here is the project, the Remarkables Gondola. You can see in this image, the background, this is a photo of the Remarkables range. Now, those of you with good eyes might have spotted this mountain in the background of the previous video. And they were looking for all kinds of bits and pieces for this project, including design visualization, visual impact study, and feasibility. I'll get into the little bits and pieces shortly. But it's worth saying that at Abley, this isn't our usual kind of work, and it's also not like me to back away from the challenges, particularly when I set myself up for it, but I was not 100% sure that this was going to go really well. So I had a few words with our CEO, Steve Abley, and after a bit of a talk, I agreed to take it on. standard fare. Doppelmayr would provide the data to us, would build the model, render up some videos, just like Frankton to Queenstown. How bad could it be? And the data came through in relatively short order, and to my surprise, there was a lot of it. Now, it was all delivered via email, and I got nearly everything I could have hoped for, all wrapped up in a bow. And of course, it was in everyone's favorite, industry standard, internationally recognized and respected format, Microsoft Excel. Lovely. Look at that. 60 plus towers, turn stations and terminals, all beautifully documented for me. And that's super convenient because I went to German gondola school and I know precisely what to do with their Roland battery. And to top that off, I received a few helpful diagrams with some somewhat spicy annotation. Maybe it's a German joke. But on the bright side, I received some nice 3D models to go with the Excel data. And they're a little bland and untextured, but it's a good starting point. You notice there's a few different tower columns, a few different head configurations that they gave us. And so all up, that's 60 plus tower models with separate bases, heads, and tower shafts. And in summary, that's about 180 different ways of saying what the hell have I got myself into. And here's where we hit cruising altitude. We had a very discerning client. They wanted a high precision model from that Excel data. They were looking for as accurate as possible depiction of the surrounding geography. They wanted some ability to check vertical and horizontal clearances on their gondola modeling. They were interested, again, as per the Queenstown example, of calculating and displaying a vegetation management zone for this. They really were firm on the gondola cables being there and representing gondola catenary cables. They were interested in getting some detailed visual impact analysis on the gondola infrastructure from a number of different points around the Queenstown Basin. They were adamant that I had to animate gondolas and do it at the correct speed. They wanted some ability to evaluate some color schemes for the gondola infrastructure. And they wanted the output videos to have some sort of cinematic feel. Now, I never really understood what more or less cinematic meant till I got near the end of the project, but it was required. And then they were interested in having a ride-along experience so that you could experience what it might be like from the model in the form of video of riding along the proposed gondolas. And then finally, your usual post-production fare, we need to get some facts and figures and overlays going into the finished model. So how long did I have to do it? Well, stage one, they were happy to go for about 25 hours to build a model and show what's going on. And if stage one was acceptable, then apply some polish, do a few tweaks, do the post-production work. Stage two, you can have 30 hours. So let's have a look at the situation. Here it is. 4 separate gondola alignments, not just one. A long reach out to the bend in the river from Frankton, a climb almost straight up the guts towards the ski area for Remarkables. And you can see that alignment 2 and 3 meet at the ski field access road. And then alignment 3 up to the summit, and alignment 4, a connecting route back down to the base area of the ski field. That meant there were 5 different buildings and interchange locations. Again, lots of gondola towers. Each of the towers had a different model, tilt, angle, relative to the ground, location, a different head configuration, and all of the heads had different tilts and rotation and positional requirements. And that meant that there really wasn't a lot of time to get all that stuff together. The catenary curve stuff seemed like it was going to be very, very challenging. With a model of this geographic size, the 3D animation could be a real problem. And then later I found out that the spreadsheet data was actually based on a lower resolution ground model than the terrain that I was putting into mine. And that meant that I need to recalculate almost everything that was in the spreadsheet to make the data work for the positioning of all of the towers and the heads. But not a problem. InfraWorks has got us covered. Using some somewhat standard techniques, you can apply attributes to your data and read it in under the table configuration, you can represent a whole series of points as 3D models and load them into a preset library. And then you can apply a style rule if you need to assign 3D models to the data source. Now, that's all true, but you're going to have to do some data wrangling and make sure your data is perfect so that InfraWorks does all the hard work for you. So what's on the menu? Preparation, as always, the key to success. We've got to interpret that spreadsheet data. We've got to recalculate all of the tower elevations onto the high-res terrain. We're going to build some tower footprint areas, calculate the clearance and vegetation management zone, look at calculating alignment angle to inform the rotation on all the towers, generate the spatial files we need with all the transforms calculated as attributes, and somehow we're going to have to model cable catenary curves between each tower. And the clock was ticking. You know, it was clear that any amount of manual work for this project was going to blow the roof off the budget. And so all that was left to do was reach into my pocket and draw my sharpened Swiss Army knife for data. Safe Software's FMA, feature manipulation engine. And so what followed was a one-man rapid prototyping session to try and transform a spreadsheet into everything I'd need to load into InfraWorks. I used a whole bunch of techniques to get this done, including point cloud statistical analysis to recalculate the tower footprint levels from a LiDAR DEM. I derived clearance zones at the correct locations. I clipped and colored my LiDAR, set all of the locations for 180 different models to set their elevation, their scale, their rotations, and then did some high school level trig there to try and precisely rotate everything perfectly so it all came out in InfraWorks nicely. You can see what I've done here to a degree, and it's sort of a low rent form of parametricism using just the models that I received. I also did some work with making coverages and grading areas, and also object data to display on all of the different models that were inside my model, my InfraWorks model. And I won't dig right down to the details of how this was all set up, but I am open to discussing that maybe outside the webinar. Now, it should be noted that some of this functionality can be reproduced with Autodesk Dynamo product. However, in the circumstances, I'm an FME guy, and I know that, you know, when you're under time pressure, you just work with what you know. So with some gentle workflow testing, I built the bones of the model from the spreadsheet data, and what lay ahead was basically the part that was keeping me awake at night. How exactly do you model cable catenaries and represent them within InfraWorks? Well, let's take a little deeper look at how I did it. How do you calm those crazy cable catenaries? Step one, take one of the tower heads and modify it in 3D Studio to assign a different material to the last wheel on the tower. Step two, load all your data in with its correct locations so that all your heads of your towers are in the correct locations. Step three, do a FBX export out of InfraWorks, and then import the FBX into FME and let it filter on the FBX geometry down at the material level. That way you can extract, step 5, all of the wheel points where the catenaries will start and end. You can join the dots together so that you've got sections of cable, and then you can do the mathematical modeling to generate your nice catenary curves. Step 8, write these guys out to SDF for InfraWorks and DWG, because we might need to bring them into 3D Studio. And then, in another unorthodox workflow, bring them in as pipes. And that's what they look like. Beautiful curved cables or pipes. Let's do a quick stock take. Some of the most difficult stuff was completed, but we still had a few challenging things left there. Animating gondolas at the correct speed could be tough. Evaluating a bunch of different color schemes for the gondola infrastructure, that's not too bad. Trying to get that cinematic feel, that's not too bad. Doing the requested ride-along experience, that could be interesting. And then obviously the final post-production work. That must mean it's time to take things to the max. So here's a little sneak view into my work in 3D Studio Max for this project. And animating gondolas on catenary curves is actually relatively easy once you know a few tricks. I'll give you a rundown on what I did to polish off the work for this project. Materials, motion, and magic. I imported my building models. I prepared the materials as per the color schemes that I was asked to evaluate. There are a few different resin paint colors that were requested, and I did some exports to show, you know, what they would look like against the surrounding environment. Applied the materials and exported them into InfraWorks. I pulled in that DWG I'd made earlier of the cable catenaries. I imported the gondola car, and it was looking a bit rough, so I gave it a bit of a spruce up. And then I attached the gondola to those catenary curves that I imported with a path constraint animation. I calculated the required animation length based on the gondola speed, the final render frame rate, and of course, how long each separate alignment was. And I broke it into multiple alignments, the 4 different alignments. Then I made clones of the gondolas. I offset their path position along that catenary curve and calculated the number of frames for one car to advance to the starting position of the next. And that meant that I could make a loop of it without having to have my gondolas go all the way around the entirety of the alignment and save so much time and so much data in my animated models going into InfraWorks. So then I exported that frame range from one gondola car to the next gondola car position out into collada format, baked the animation, and re-imported it back into InfraWorks. And that's the whole lot done. Post-production overlays, finishing touches just needed to be sorted out, and things were going really, really well, which means that it's time for something to go wrong. Now for a project plot twist. We're just finished up in 2019 sorting this work out, and we came back to work in 2020, and it was a new year, and we received a brand new alignment and a brand new spreadsheet. And a comment that was, I hope that's not going to be too much of an inconvenience. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. Andrew, that's a variation. You can just get the client to foot the bill for that. And you'd be right. However, I still had a few hours left in the budget, and I hadn't come this far just to be thwarted by something basic like an entire alignment change. So with 10 minutes of contemplation and one deep breath, I decided to see just how far we could push the value of InfraWorks, and we can rebuild in 6 easy steps. Step 1, remember that InfraWorks is live linked to all of your data sources. Step 2, point FME at your new spreadsheet file and press run. Should take about 2 minutes. Step 3, open your InfraWorks model, select all the data sources, and press refresh data. Sit back and wait for 3 minutes. Step 4, obviously go get a coffee, very important engineering workflow. Step 5, rebuild your cable catenaries. And step 6, reconstruct gondola animation in 3D Studio. Now, with the coffee on board, that should take about 60 minutes. Update your storyboard with a new camera path. I had FME create the camera path for me, so I could just import it. And then fire up your rendering suite and your editing suite, because it's time to take it into post-production and add your bits and pieces. So now, as promised, here's the eye candy that Adam really wanted you to see. Here's the video that we presented to the client. Now, I don't know if the sound is on this, but I can assure you it does have a pumping soundtrack. You'll see I've used a few interesting techniques, including overlaying a master plan underneath the gondola alignment. That came as a client request. There goes some of the overlays on the screen that were requested in post-production. Now, this alignment seemed to blend in really, really well, and so it was requested that I put in a big red line down the middle of it, just for those that are visually impaired and couldn't tell exactly where everything was. I've taken the LiDAR, which again was black and white. Now I've clipped it up, including the clearance area for vegetation management down the middle of the alignment. And then I've colored it, and then I've taken a copy of that LiDAR and offset it from itself a small amount to make it look like there's a lot more vegetation density in the area. Really fills out the picture a bit more when you go to render it. I sourced the polygons for the water areas from Lins. It was very easy to put together, but still looks very effective. You'll see that all of the geometry is generating shadows. I've got tower footprint areas that I calculated inside FME sitting under all of the towers. I think I might let this speak for itself for a bit.
Hey Andrew, it's Adam. Did this get built?
Not as of 2020.
Still in the works, is it?
Yeah. I think there's some consideration going on around what the long-term viability of it's going to be with respect to tourist numbers.
Sure. It's probably a good
now we're getting
to just tell anyone, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to type them out in the question window.
Yep. This is the end of the first alignment here with a sort of a station where people could board it if they did a park and ride for this particular location. Instead of coming in from the Queenstown side, you come in from around towards Arrowtown or up through Frankton upstream from it. Now this is the steep alignment that heads straight up the side of the Remarkables. Again, you can see the duplication and coloration of the LiDAR technique and the clipping along the center line with the vegetation growth management area. Looks quite good here. I re-rendered this particular part a number of times because it wasn't cinematic enough. I think it has something to do with better frame rate, widescreen, picking a better soundtrack perhaps. And remember, all of this data was publicly available with the exception of the gondola design and the spreadsheet, of course.
Just a quick question for you. How long have you been using InfraWorks for?
I first opened InfraWorks very, very late in 2015. I did my first piece of work in InfraWorks in 2016 as part of a pro bono project that was being done in Christchurch for the East Lake. And the images and videos that I produced for that were featured in the front page of some quite prominent print media.
Nice. How'd you find the learning curve with InfraWorks?
Oh, not too bad really on the whole. I think it pays to understand your data really well and what it's doing as it goes in. The more you understand about your data, particularly spatial, the better you are equipped to be able to leverage its power. Mm-hmm. And you know, you learn it step by step, piece by piece, but most of it I found very, very intuitive. And for the things that you just couldn't do with some of the tools that were in there, or they just weren't quite the right tool that you needed, you've got Civil 3D that can do the more detailed stuff. There's some great workflows back and forth from AutoCAD. And then if you have to, then controlling your data on the way in and getting it ready and preparing it right will let InfraWorks do all the hard work. So there's a big, beautiful view back out over Lake Wakatipu, back towards Queenstown or around to the Frankton area.
There's a question that's come in. Oh, this video's finished now. I'll ask this question now. Your catenaries, did that modeling take into account the mass of the gondola? So is it catenary from tower to gondola, or is it catenary from tower to tower?
It's catenary from tower to tower. However, the SAG that was given to us, we were given a Excel file that had some rough calculations on what the SAG would be from Doppelmayr, and they said it's going to be something like this much SAG on the catenary. So that's probably a better question for Doppelmayr to be able to tell us, but you know, that gave us a little bit of information about how to find the lowest point, or the point of peak SAG on the catenaries when we went to model them. Mm-hmm.
Another question. I feel like this is probably an okay place to stop and pause for questions. Prior to animation, was all of the placement of content of the model in InfraWorks, or did you need FME or something like Dynamo to place the objects from that data?
So the transforms on all of the 3D models were calculated as attributes via FME and then loaded in as points represented by 3D models in InfraWorks. So to answer the question, all of the content was correctly placed in my InfraWorks model before I went to 3D Studio. In fact, I only used 3D Studio to animate those gondolas on the catenaries. And to texture the buildings, I guess, and do some color ups.
I've never used FME personally, but I feel like there's some similarities in the, I guess, the capabilities of wrangling that data as you put it. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Just from a Dynamo perspective as well.
I think there's a lot of stuff that's similar. I'd certainly like to see some of these workflows that I produced reproduced in Dynamo for Autodesk users to get a better handle on what's going on. I think the key difference I found, or at least I'm aware of, is the scalability on the FME side is probably a little bit different.
Yeah.
And maybe being able to operate with some different types of data outside of the standard open/Autodesk formats that can be an advantage depending on what you're doing. But I would think that many, potentially all, but definitely many of the things that I did here could be done with Dynamo.
Just another question. We'll take this as the last one before I let you keep going. I'm sure you've got some more to go. Did you make use of Civil View in 3ds Max for the gondolas, for anything for that matter?
No, but I did consider that. I did consider using Civil View, and some of the Civil View like tools seem like they would be useful for doing that sort of thing. In 3D Studio, in my estimation, it's much for muchness. I did definitely use Civil View when placing the animated traffic on the SH6 corridor, and I have used Civil View before a number of times for more detailed animation. Yep.
Cool. All right. I think we'll leave it at that for questions. But if anyone else has got more, keep them coming in. We'll let Andrew finish his presentation.
Well, there's not too much more other than the promised ride-along video, which is just a supercut showing what it might be like to travel along on this gondola alignment at a few interesting positions. There was originally an intent that I could take this to a higher quality visualization setting, maybe 3D Studio or perhaps Unreal Engine, and then do a large scale render that they could blow up with a projector up against some screens, and they could engage their stakeholders by bringing in one of the gondola cars and sitting them inside it and then playing the video behind it. Again, this has a nice pumping soundtrack. I don't know if it's audible at the other end, but yeah, all of the stuff, all of the camera positions and the views were assembled for me via FME, but you can, of course, manually do this relatively easy with InfraWorks as well.
Did you do all these renderings in InfraWorks?
Yes, this is all InfraWorks stock render. Yeah.
That was a question that just dropped in, so I thought I'd ask.
So, if there's three things you might want to take away from this presentation at least, build it and they'll come. If you spend just a little bit of money, a little bit of time building an InfraWorks model for what will become quite a big project, then you will get more work from it if you put quality data in and just set it up right. Embrace your creativity. Just because there isn't a gondola design package or tools inside InfraWorks doesn't mean that you can't imagine something and innovate. Do the thinking up front and you can do extraordinary things. And then finally, prep your data. Preparation is always key for getting the most out of almost any product. So work smarter and not harder. And that's all I have to share. I think
Awesome.
I'll pass back to you, Adam.
Yeah, share that back to me. Thank you for that, Andrew. That was awesome. Such a good presentation, and just a really unique way of using InfraWorks. A little bit left of center, I suppose. Okay, can you see my screen?
Looks good.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, just to finish off today, we'll have some additional Q&A at the end if anyone wants to ask some more questions. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about some community updates and some different topics that I've spoken to people about over the last 6 months. So these are some of the hot topics, I suppose, that I talk to people about. So there's three main things here I'm going to dive into. One of them is Civil 3D. Second one is the Autodesk Construction Cloud, which is sort of a second iteration of BIM 360 that's been released recently. And then our recent acquisition of Innovise. So, I mean, from a Civil 3D perspective, I hear a lot about Dynamo. I'm pretty passionate about it myself, and it's a conversation that I'm having with everyone. Everyone's talking about automation and how can they do things to automate some of their tasks, and I think that speaks well to what Andrew spoke about in his presentation, because he relied heavily on that automation perspective to save the project some money. If you haven't seen Dynamo, I've just got a little example of it here on the right playing on loop. It's just I'm automating hatch patterns in Civil 3D. It's a real simple use case, but something that I've spent a lot of time doing when I was a junior, and it can be automated now. I do want to talk about an example that I came across. A great example for Dynamo for Civil 3D. Now, this is a GIS-focused workflow. So on the screen, you've got a whole bunch of photos that have got latitude, longitude, and altitude information. This has come from a colleague of mine in Germany, so it's not in English, but I think you still get the message. So what they did here was they used a Dynamo script, a little bit of Python in it, a bit of Python coding, nothing too serious. And what they were doing is interrogating each of those photos from the folder location, and they were extracting out the data for the location, that location parameter, so the latitude, the longitude, and the elevation. Then the final step in this process was to place a little block reference inside of the Civil 3D model, which you can see here, these little yellow tags everywhere, and that shows like the geographical location of where that photo was taken. Then they also added a hyperlink as a property here, and the cool thing about this workflow is that you can access that photo directly from Civil 3D with the use of the hyperlink. So that's just one awesome little workflow that I've came across from a Dynamo for Civil 3D perspective. I also want to talk a little bit about grading optimization. So this is sort of the next iteration around generative design for civil. So what we have is the ability to take a tin surface and then apply different parameters to it. So we might put the location of the parcels, we can define the locations of drainage, and then we can set the parameters such as minimum and maximum slopes and grades and things like that. And then the software will go and automate the grading of that surface, and then it can be used down the line as a proper tin inside of Civil 3D. Now, the second example here also shows taking some road alignment. So you can bring road alignment in, you can define the location of, again, drainage and of basins, things like that. And then you can start to grade your sites in a much more automated way. So this product here it's going to be called Grading Optimization. It's coming very soon. You can see some classes on it at Autodesk University. I can't say much more than that. But if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm sure in the not too distant future, you will see some posts by me about that. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about Autodesk Construction Cloud. So for those familiar with BIM 360, Autodesk Construction Cloud is sort of the next iteration of BIM 360. Now, Bim Collaborate Pro is one of the modules inside of Autodesk Construction Cloud, which is very similar to, well, it's the same as the previous BIM 360 design. So I've had a lot of questions about what's the difference and what product, products have changed names basically. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that for everyone on the call. So Bim Collaborate Pro is the new or the next version of BIM 360 Design. So this is the module that you have where you can save your Revit models up to the cloud if you've done that Revit cloud work sharing type of workflow. But then also from a Civil 3D perspective, you can manage your data shortcuts and save DWGs, and there's file locking and things like that. So yeah, that's the little bit of a difference there, and the new offering, I suppose. We also have Autodesk Takeoff and Autodesk Build. That's sort of more aimed at the construction side of things, so post-design, or if you're doing estimation, you would use Takeoff, and then Build is really out in the field. So you're doing issues management and tracking the health of a project, RFIs, meeting minutes, that sort of thing. But I only really wanted to focus today on the design side, which is the BIM Collaborate Pro pieces of software. And then lastly, a little bit of an update around Innovise. So I've spoken to a lot of you guys out there, and you've given me some really good insights into the products that sit inside of Innovise. So for those that aren't aware, Innovise is really this end-to-end water solution software. I know a lot of people in our region use the XP stuff. So it's really exciting that Autodesk recently announced the acquisition of Innovise. It's still quite early on in the piece. I don't really know what's going to happen with the integration of it, so I can't really comment on that. I think it's been a couple of weeks since we signed the acquisition, so over the next year, I suppose we'll start to see what happens in that space. But I think it's a really good move from Autodesk, because for our region especially, that water design aspect is being the missing key. And I think now that we have a company like Innovise on board, it's going to be really exciting to see where that goes into the future. So with that, that's sort of all I had to talk about today. We've got a few minutes left on the call. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to post them into the chat window and we can start to address them. There are a couple in here. Andrew, are you off mute?
I should be.
Yep, cool. All right. So this question here, this is not directed at you. I did have a question for you. Actually, it was more of a comment, Andrew. What I found really interesting with one part of your presentation is that you could have charged your client a variation, right? But instead, you used the last remaining bit of your budget to do that work. Did you get any feedback from the client about, thanks for doing that, or did they not know about that? I mean, the way I see it is, because you've set up this project so efficiently and you're able to automate a lot of this work, you're probably improving your relationship with your clients by not hitting them up with a variation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair to say. I mean, it's very common in visualization to, only put together what the camera's going to see. So when, the alignment changes completely, then that could be a real problem. But because the majority of the model was all there in InfraWorks and ready to go, it was really just a very short additional piece of work to reconstruct everything. And that's just down to data prep. We had built, I built something that could produce and prep all of the data for that alignment, but it's not just that alignment. It could be any conceivable alignment, really. And that's the power of InfraWorks being able to handle and interop with all of the data that was prepared, and being able to prepare the data in a manner that InfraWorks can read really nicely. It gives you a lot of flexibility. I think the client was happy with a very competitive price. I don't think this wasn't put out to tender. So we, in all honesty, probably could have just hit them with a variation, but I felt that, with the time that we had remaining and the fact that it was our first project with that client, that it's probably better to, do the small bit of extra work. We still made budget, no problem. and got it done, and they were very happy with what they got. So, you know, if you set it up right, it shouldn't be a problem.
Nice. So there is a couple of questions here, and they're kind of both for me at this point, so I'll answer them. How is the compatibility of working in Bim Collaborate Pro in Revit and Civil 3D at the same time? So the best way, or the best workflow, I suppose, when it comes to working with Civil 3D and Revit is via the Publish Surfaces function inside of Civil 3D. So if you're designing you're doing some land development, or you're designing some surfaces, you can publish those surfaces to the cloud, and then you can link in the topography, or link in that surface into Revit as a topography, as a proper topography category, and you can then control the visibility of it that way. I hope that's what you're asking, Juan. If it's not, feel free to send me an email. My email's on the screen here. Johan, you've said, I've tested the beta for grading optimization, which has got a few bugs. When do you foresee these being addressed? And will it be rolled out as part of the Civil package, or will it stay as an add-on for Civil 3D? So I can say it will stay as an add-on inside of Civil 3D. In terms of bugs, I'm not sure how long ago you were doing the beta testing, but I imagine, you know, from the feedback you and other people would have given them, let's hope that they did iron those bugs out. And when I can't really comment on when it's going to be rolled out, but it is going to come soon. So look, if there's no other questions, we've got a couple of minutes left. I might wrap it up here. Andrew, thank you so much for today, mate. That was an awesome presentation, super exciting. I'm glad you got to show off your work to a wider audience, because yeah, I was super impressed the first time I saw some of those screenshots. So thank you for joining today. And yeah, if anyone wants to send Andrew an email, there's his email address there. If you want to add us on LinkedIn, happy to chat anytime. There's a couple more questions. If there's any questions, yes, Johan, feel free to email me. You've got my email address there, or via LinkedIn. And there's one more question. Is there anything in the pipes for Topo in Revit having the ability to take levels off? I'm not sure if there's anything in the pipeline for that, but Dynamo can certainly help in that regard. If you want to ping me separately, I can explain how that could be done. I'd look to Dynamo for working with Topo and levels. Okay, so with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time today. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. I'll see you in our next installment of our community meetup. Bye.